Welcome to the WorldTeach webinar, and this is on our newest professional development summer programs. Thank you for joining us as we discuss training, placements, culture, and local project development. We have many listeners on the line, so we're excited to start the conversation. Amongst our listeners, we have some new applicants, those that have been accepted into a program, and others that are interested in learning more about these summer program options and WorldTeach. We also have our panelists, the Summer Program Coordinators, joining us from Curitiba, Brazil, and Ladakh, India. To quickly introduce myself, my name is Nolan Sutker. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications here at WorldTeach, and my international teaching experience was in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where I taught English for 4 years and did curriculum development at an NGO in Rocinha, a local Rio favela. To start, let's go over our agenda. We'll spend a few minutes meeting our panelists and learning a bit about their backgrounds. Then we'll get into some topics of discussion. Think of it as your journey through the program and what to expect or prepare for during your time in either Brazil or India. This will include arrival, orientation week, your first days in your new community, day-to-day life, immersion strategies, in-community project development, reflection, and excursions at the culmination of your volunteer experience as well. Finally, we'll go over the application process, qualifications, and deadlines, along with program fees, dates, and support. At the end, we'll dedicate time to a Q&A session with our panelists. Throughout the webinar, you can submit questions through the chat function that you should see on your screen. We will wait until the end to address them as a group. Let's continue. On the line with us is Rafaela Horim, coming to us all the way from Curitiba, Brazil. As you can see, Rafaela has a wealth of knowledge and experience in cultural exchange. Rafaela, boa tarde. Can you tell us why you first decided to live overseas and a bit more about your background?
Okay, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to connect with you. So I've been an exchange student myself in the United States as a high school exchange student, and I've lived both in France for an internship abroad and in Spain for a language course. And I've been working in the culture exchange field for 11 years now. And I have a big pleasure to welcome volunteers and international students to Brazil, because I believe in culture exchange as a way to promote the respect for diversity. So we organize those experiences and support the volunteers here representing WorldTeach in Brazil.
Obrigado, Rafaela. And moving along to our next panelist. On the line with us is Bazad Larry, coming to us all the way from Ladakh, India, recently back from a 6-week trek. Bazad has quite an extensive amount of knowledge on policy and development. Bazad, good evening. Can you tell us about your first experience in an unfamiliar country or place and a bit more about your background?
Hi, Nolan. Thanks. I'm still seeing something up top that says attendees still on hold. So can everyone hear me?
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
You can continue, Bazad.
All right, great. So yeah, one of the first, so I grew up in India and then I immigrated to the US when I was 15. So that was possibly one of the first times I had traveled abroad and gotten immersed. But then I think the real experience came when I was a college student in the US and I studied abroad in Morocco. And I think that was probably the first time I traveled abroad to a place that was totally foreign to me, had a very different language from one that I spoke, and that experience sort of got me hooked on both traveling and providing services to allow others to have similar experiences that bond them with the country they're traveling to.
Okay, Bazad, thank you for sharing that. Next part we're going to go to, the first space is about arrival. In any international service or professional development experience, there are a couple, many aha moments you encounter. This first moment of arriving in a new country and knowing you'll be there for 7 to 8 weeks can be uncertain. Rafaela, I'll go to you first. Where will WorldTeach Brazil volunteers arrive, and where will they go during their first day?
Okay, so we start with an arrival orientation. The first day, as you arrive at the airport, every student will be accommodated in their host families. And the next day, after you rest a bit, we are going to meet for an orientation to talk about safety in Brazil, our culture, transportation in Curitiba. And so we cover aspects that will help you adapt quicker in Brazil. In this first week of orientation, you'll be also receiving a training on teaching English. And I guess we will cover that more in detail along the presentation.
Absolutely, Rafaela. Yeah, thinking about that first day, we'll move to more of the details of orientation in a couple of minutes. And quickly back to Bazad, can you answer that question as well, thinking about first impressions of the volunteers, and what will be some things that will surprise the cohort to begin?
For sure. Once everyone gets to Delhi, we'll pick you guys up. We'll then sort of have just 1 day of relaxation and taking it easy in Delhi before we catch a flight up to Leh, which is at about almost 11,000 feet up in the Trans-Himalaya. We'll spend the next 2 days getting to know a little bit of Leh and slowly acclimatizing to the altitude. The first thing you notice when you fly into Leh is that it's just hemmed in on all sides with these big, tall mountains, some of which are part of the Himalayan range and some of which are part of the Karakoram. It'll also start us off on the topic of understanding how up here in these mountains we're actually witnessing what the first indications of climate change are. And it'll set the course for our week-long orientation on how climate change is affecting the lives of Ladakhis, how it's playing a role in India, what the country as a whole is doing, and what Ladakh in particular is doing to mitigate it, and how that also ties into educational aspects and curriculum aspects of children studying in Ladakh. So we'll go over the Indian educational system and then over details of the Ladakhi curriculum, school curriculum, and then we'll bring in a few experts to help understand and go over the challenges of teaching in a place like that, and then also trying to understand, help volunteers understand how they fit in for the short period that they're there and how they can be most useful while also being able to learn a lot.
Thank you, Bazad. Rafaela, quickly, when the volunteers arrive, again, thinking just very much the first day, and we'll thank you for both elaborating on orientation details, but where will the volunteers stay when they arrive? And Bazad, just after, you can talk about this as well, thinking about that first night or two.
Sure.
Okay, so the volunteers stay in homestays in Curitiba. We are located in the south of Brazil. Curitiba is the state capital of Paraná. And so as soon as the students arrive, we will pick them up and take to the host families for the first night. And the next day is the orientation. So it's when we meet all together to start the orientation sessions and the teaching preparation. Curitiba is a city of 2 million people. It's recognized as a model in Latin America of sustainable development. So it's a reference in Brazil and our neighbor countries in terms of safety, urban planning, how we deal with the environment. It's a really beautiful city, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
Thank you, Rafaela. And Bazad, quickly, those first impressions, that first day and night where the volunteers would stay.
Sure. The first day, we'll just be in Delhi. We'll be at a hotel in central Delhi and do a little bit of sightseeing, taking in the sights, getting used to the hecticness and the rush and the press of India before retreating to a much calmer, more serene spot in Leh in the Himalayas. And so day 2 and 3 will also be in Leh before we head out to this very nice little hotel that is part of an organic farm. It's like a farm stay where the rest of the orientation will be conducted in the Nubra Valley.
Thank you, Bezad.
After which everyone will go off to homestays, basically. Yeah.
Thank you, and setting up that contrast of what the volunteers would see. Both of you, thank you both for sharing that information and even touching upon some of the aspects of the orientation. A little more detailed questions here about the orientation. Bezad, how long will the WorldTeach India orientation be? And you mentioned it, where it will take place, just to kind of go over that one more time.
Sure. So the first day is just arrival in Delhi. Then days from day 2 to day 7 will basically be orientation split between 2 places, one in Leh and one in Nubra Valley. And it'll once orientation concludes, basically we'll be assigning volunteers with their placement sites and pairing them up with teachers from those schools on the final day so that they can have a day together with us and then also have an understanding of how their homestays will function and where they'll be staying, and be able to go back and forth with any questions they might have at that point. This will be during orientation. Then beyond that, they'll be staying at homestays or in boarding facilities provided by the school themselves.
Thank you, Bezad. And Rafaela, just a little more elaboration as well on the OR. What are 2 of the 3 of the most important topics the WorldTeach Brazil cohort will learn during their first week in OR? Is there anything that they should bring or prepare for beforehand?
During the first week, we have the orientation sessions, basically to cover those cultural aspects in Brazil, so the volunteers can understand more about how we relate in our professional environment or the volunteer site, safety, transportation, as I said before. The volunteers will also receive teacher training and have a language immersion to learn survival Portuguese. It's important, of course, the more you can already study or like we encourage volunteers to try to connect with Portuguese before coming. This will help you. This will allow you to have a deeper immersion. The more Portuguese you learn while here or even before, if you can start using some apps or taking online classes, this will allow you to connect at the community where you'll be placed. So the language can be a challenge in terms of discussions, how further you can go on a conversation with the locals. So this would be my tip before arrival, that you try to learn the basics of Portuguese even before coming. Although it's not a requirement, this will certainly allow you to have a deeper experience.
Okay, and Bezad as well, a couple of maybe recommendations of things that volunteers should bring or prepare for before their trek to Ladakh, India.
So while we'll cover a lot of different things during orientation, one of the key things will be getting people comfortable with living in a place like Ladakh, understanding how the society functions. Basically, arming volunteers should arm themselves beforehand with a little bit of knowledge about Tibetan Buddhism, perhaps, about what Ladakh's history has been and how it is currently in the position it is as one of India's leading Himalayan tourist destinations, but then also with understanding how what sort of role it plays on the international stage, being in an important geopolitical area between Pakistan and China on either side. And then, of course, we'll discuss heavily about the Indian education system, and there's a lot of resources online, and we'll email a lot of these out as well on what path India's education system is currently taking and what the major challenges are in rural education, as is the kind most volunteers will face in Ladakh, and the sort of constraints you need to work in when you're in a rural school. So we'll cover those aspects, and we'll send out reading material that covers those aspects as well, because it's not, you can't really learn that much in a week when the system is this vast and has both many problems and many very cool innovations that people have done to get around some of those problems. So we'll have a reading list that gets sent out before that.
Oh, wonderful, thank you, Bazad. Next, moving along and thinking about after orientation and the volunteers' kind of first glimpse into their new community. And Rafaela, quickly, what are the housing and accommodations for volunteers, and maybe some of the differences and similarities between Curitiba, where some of them may be living, and also the Caichalas, these fishing villages that they may be placed as well?
Yes, okay. So Curitiba, it's a modern city. We have families, most of them live in buildings instead of houses. And we select host families that really like to interact with other cultures. So many of them have already hosted international students. And we also have some students which will be placed in Caiçaras communities, which are traditional fishermen villages. So Curitiba is about 1 hour and a half from the coast. And in this region of Paraná state, there are some communities which are reachable only by boat. There are no roads to get to those places. And there are certain communities who live basically by fishing and planting their own food. And we intend to have some volunteers there teaching English to those children and teenagers who live in the community at their schools. So in the fishermen communities, it's more like a natural place where the volunteers will have a chance to connect with a completely different way of living. While here in Curitiba, you have access to commerce and leisure, nightlife. So those are two different placement possibilities. And according to what you like the most, perhaps you could suggest where you would rather be placed, in a metropolitan, in a cosmopolitan city, or in the coast in a traditional fisherman village. Those are two options.
Obrigado, Rafaela. Bazad, quickly as well, can you give some details about some of the accommodations during their volunteer time?
Sure. So we've also got sort of a similar split, although I wouldn't call Leh a cosmopolitan or metropolitan city. It's a small touristy town. It's got lots of fun cafes and dining spots to go to, but it is a semi-rural mountain town. The other option is in Nubra Valley, which will mostly be homestays or living on the school premises in sort of the dorm or boarding facilities that they also have for students, obviously in a separate private place of your own. Nubra is a lot more rural, so homestays will involve traditional sort of farming family, which will most likely have both the husband and the wife working, either out and about in the fields or in some sort of government job. They'll be pretty self-sufficient in terms of how they grow their own food, and you will consume a lot of the same stuff that they are growing themselves. So there's a little small market area in the valley, and you can get most things there that pertain to personal health, hygiene, food, supplies, things like that. And there are a few hotels around, but it'll be a lot more immersive in terms of really learning the language and learning how Ladakhi culture is and how a community functions at in a rural area like that, where oftentimes you'll feel like time has stood still. On the other hand, in Leh, it'll be a lot more bustling. There'll be a lot of international tourists around, and there will be more opportunities to mix the new with the old in both a homestay setting as well as in a school housing situation.
Thank you, Behzad. That kind of leads into my favorite subject, which is food. Rafaela, and then we'll go back to Behzad after this. What are some of the traditional foods in southern Brazil? And what is the typical diet of a volunteer? And just quickly before you answer, any new attendees that have come on, if you'd like to leave any questions with us, please use that function they should have on your screen. And Rafaela, go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, so the volunteers have breakfast and dinner included in the homestay placement. And our breakfast is normally milk with coffee, bread with butter or cheese, and a fruit. Some families also have tea or orange juice for breakfast. In the Caiçara communities, the fishermen villages, they eat a lot of cookies and bread also. The dinner, well, our main meal in Brazil is lunch. As you'll be volunteering during the day, normally you have lunch or at the project or in a restaurant nearby. But most Brazilians have for lunch rice and beans, that our most common side dish, together with beef and salad. And for dinner, a lot of families in the cities, big cities, we have just a snack, something light, such as a soup or a sandwich, a salad. It's not a big meal as you have in the US. In the fishermen villages, they get together more often to have meals at night. So they eat something similar to lunch also at night. But in the big cities, we tend to do something that's quicker, as not every time the family can get together and sit for a dinner, everyone in the same table. So that's a little bit of you're going to taste. In the Caiçara communities, of course, they eat a lot of seafood because they are fishermen, really fresh fish and swimming crabs. So it's really, really delicious. And they have, they really like to share with the volunteers how they prepare, and you have the chance also to go fishing with the fishermen. So it's in terms of cultural immersion, it's something really, really different and unique.
Okay, obrigado, Rafaela. So no papaya in the morning typically, huh? No fruits?
Yeah, there are fruits, papaya, bananas, pineapple. Well, it really depends on each family, of course, but normally we have coffee and milk and bread and cheese. This is very, very common.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. Behzad, quickly as well, some of the typical foods, especially the farm to table and growing and eating in the same place that the volunteers will be living on a farm. Can you elaborate a bit some of the food they'll be taking in?
Sure. Yeah, I've already gotten really hungry after hearing that description. So generally, what will happen for breakfast is that you'll have 2 or 3 varieties of tea. The Ladakhi family will, for the most part, drink this salty, buttery tea called Tibetan salt butter tea, and they've gotten quite used to the fact that outsiders, foreigners, Westerners, and even other Indians cannot really drink too much of that tea without having lived there for a while and gotten used to it. So there'll also be either coffee or just regular Western tea with milk on the side, or sugar, or however you like your tea. Then for breakfast, most of the time there's fresh homemade bread that most families produce or buy from the local baker. They're sort of round, flat, thick breads with either eggs or yogurt or some sort of vegetable that's been cooked, depending on the family and the day it is. Some of the families which are Buddhist will not eat things that are meat or egg based on certain days. For lunch, there's a really big tradition in India, especially in workspaces, where people will often bring lunch from home, pack lunch from home, and then share it with their colleagues. So the volunteers should expect to get fed pretty well at lunchtime by the other teachers, who will definitely feel pretty encouraged to give to someone who's there for a short time and is from the outside. So traditional Ladakhi cuisine often involves a lot of barley, as it grows really well at high altitudes. So there are a lot of barley-based dishes and dough-based dishes like noodles and dumplings and so on that can be with or without meat. And then there are a lot of fresh fruits in the summer, from apricot trees, apple trees, and then a whole variety of different fruits that get shipped up from the other parts of India. Especially since this is such an agrarian community, you'll often be brought things that are just fresh and straight from the farm. Even a lot of the farmers have their own goats and livestock and sheep and so on. So every now and then one of those will be slaughtered and the meat will be distributed amongst many families. So it'll be sort of like a feast. Then for dinner, generally there should be a mix of some sort of bread, some sort of rice, and 2 or 3 different dishes with vegetables, curries, and some sort of a traditional doughy, soupy thing like dumplings and a type of soup. Almost all the vegetables you'll eat will have been grown by the family or by families surrounding where you live. And for the most part, it is still organic and it's all mountain stream fed. And you'll pass those same fields on your way to work. So it's pretty interesting to see that there are still communities that are this connected to, that are this sensitive to both what they grow and what they eat, and how connected the whole system is.
Wow. Thank you, Bazad and Hafiela, for sharing all that information and so many different options for people as they consider going to either India and Brazil, and the types of local foods that they will have. Moving to the next part of kind of the day-to-day life of the volunteer, quickly over to Hafiela. Hafiela, what's the daily schedule of a volunteer in either Curitiba or the Caiçaras? How much of that time is dedicated to teaching?
Okay, so the volunteers teach around, are at the project around 4 to 6 hours a day, teaching and also getting involved in other activities according to their interests and their abilities to support the project, because they don't offer only classes, but also other activities with the children to keep them away off the streets. In the case of Curitiba, those are part-time projects that the students go after school to have other alternatives, because they don't have the support of their families at home. And in the Caiçara communities, they are going to teach at the school. So basically for half period each day, morning or afternoon, we have different projects in the city and the schools also in the coast. Some of them run in the morning for children and afternoon for teenagers, for example. So you should expect to teach or to get involved in other tasks at the volunteer project for a half period of your day, 4 to 6 hours.
Thank you, Rafaela, and Bazad quickly as well, kind of that day and the balance between their teaching and their schedule.
Yeah, so I would it would depend based on which of the host organizations they're placed at. Some of the schools do have sort of an adult community also that comes in the evenings for some adult-based learning. So for those schools, it would be about 4 hours in the day and about 3 hours in the afternoon to evening of work time, which would mostly be about teaching. For the schools that are just for students who are under 18, it's going to be during the normal school hours, which are generally about 9 to 4. And about that 70%, I think, would be spent teaching or in planning with other teachers. And for the most part, what we've got is English teaching, and then a lot of requests have been made for computers and general computer usage. So for most American volunteers, that'll be pretty easy, given that most Ladakhis have pretty rudimentary computer skills. So just teaching Word, Excel, even just how to properly respond to emails for to help your parents out, that'll be very, very useful.
Thank you, Bazad. And on that kind of same subject, and again, we'll go back to Rafaela as well with the same type of question. What are some of the basic resources all volunteers will have in their respective community? Or maybe on the other side, what are a couple of relatively modern conveniences that they may not have access to? And we'll start with Bazad.
Yeah, I'll start with what they might not have access to is a good, reliable internet connection. During the summers, generally, internet is pretty good in Ladakh. So it might just be a non-issue, but it could happen that might not be the case. The other thing is power cuts. Generally there's good electricity in the summer from about 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then during the daytime, there isn't much power. It's not really missed because there's a lot of light everywhere, and most architecture is pretty light focused. There's lots of windows. There are lots of natural light options, but it is a pain if you need to charge something. And so, which is obviously a problem when you're using computers or are very reliant on that sort of using PowerPoint or something to show your lessons. So it's going to have to be a lot of blackboard learning and conversation classes and a lot of reading and writing, and not very heavily computer or projector based. And then the modern facilities in school, in Leh, there are quite a few schools that we've spoken with for volunteers that have really good learning tools available. They've got a lot of computers, they've got projectors and so on. And the rural schools, the more government funded schools, don't have most of those facilities, and thus will actually really benefit from also having a volunteer. But at the same time, the volunteer would be constrained in their access to certain teaching tools that are electronic.
Thank you, Bazad, and Rafaela as well to the same question.
Okay, so in Curitiba, basically the volunteers live in very comfortable houses and structured apartments, but they volunteer in projects which are located in the poor communities, normally in the suburbs. So all those communities are accessible by public transportation, but still some of them are like in non-pavimented neighborhoods. The projects vary. Some of them have nice computer labs, for example, and provide internet access to the children and teenagers, but others don't have such a nice structure. But here in Curitiba, all the volunteers will have easy access to internet, even with their own phones. In the Caiçara communities, there is poor internet reception, like for our phones. So there are certain points in the islands or in the communities where you can really see your Facebook or check something on your phone. But the schools normally provide access to the internet. Some of them make it available for the students. Some of them will only allow the teachers to use the internet. So it depends, but they also have a couple computers to print papers, but not a computer lab, for example, for the students' use. So the students will be expected to teach with the blackboard and materials in the Caiçara communities. Here in Curitiba, you do have more resources, although in the communities, you might also need to use the creativity, because you probably won't have like each student in a computer or something to teach with online resources or something like that. So encourage also to teach using like games and make the class more fun rather than only instructional. And of course, we will help you through the training to learn some tools and resources to get the students involved.
Thank you, Rafaela. And speaking about fun and more on the recreation side, Behzad, quickly in the local communities where the volunteer will be, what are some things that they do for fun or recreation, and what are some things you've noticed other volunteers in the past do in that area?
Well, for those that are athletically minded, there are constantly games of cricket going on. I've seen a lot of games of soccer, cricket, and archery. Archery is sort of like the national sport, national pastime over here. And a lot of people of all ages are, you can constantly see them out in the field shooting at little pieces of wood, which are quite an impressive distance. So I've recently gotten into that, and it's been lots of fun. Then there are also a lot of things that can be done outside. So fishing, trekking, going on hikes. There's a lot of opportunity for bird watching. And if you're more the TV watching type, satellite TV works totally fine. And a lot of Ladakhis do prefer to sort of just hang out inside in the evening next to the fire watching some TV. But there are definitely, it's an absolutely amazing place to be if you're at all outdoorsy and you like to be involved in something active. The Ladakhis also brew a lot of things with rice and barley, which they serve quite frequently.
Thank you, Behzad. Moving quickly to this next part of a couple of parts about immersion strategies. Rafaela, as summer volunteers begin to assimilate into either the Caiçaras or the Curitiba community, are there some successful strategies you usually recommend, and maybe share one or two techniques that volunteers should use?
In terms of immersion?
Yeah, just different ways that benefit to assimilate. I know you mentioned some fast track Portuguese classes in the beginning, but just some ideas of maybe people that they should meet, or certain foods or places they should go, anything that you've done that have been successful with volunteers in the past for immersion strategy. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think it's very, very important to connect with the locals. As the volunteers will come as a group, it's very common for the exchange students to organize activities among themselves. And this is, of course, easier because you all come from the same country and are living the same experience. But we highly encourage the volunteers to connect with their host families. We have what we call the friends of our volunteers, which are Brazilians who like to interact with foreigners, and they are invited to our events, welcoming events, to really become a friend and someone who will support, someone from the same age range, which will support our volunteers by inviting them to activities like barbecues or lunch, parties. So this is really important to have this in mind, because if you don't have the consciousness of the importance to connect with locals, you will just do things with other Americans and you will be losing the chance to experience Brazilian culture. So that's very, very important, like as a reminder to have this focus. At the volunteer project, for example, few people speak English, so a way to connect with them is to bring pictures on, like a photo album, or even pictures on your phone that you can show your way of life in the US to those kids and the co-workers at the volunteer project. So you could bring pictures of your home, of your family, of your cities. If you come from a city where it snows, for example, it will be really amazing, because we don't have snow here in Curitiba, to show those kids and to show something about Halloween, for example. That's a celebration we don't have in Brazil, that it's starting actually in some English schools, but you could show how you celebrate and how you live. So bringing typical things from your culture to share, that's a way to connect, because you'll be encouraging the kids or the other people you relate in Brazil to share their culture also, and you'll be then learning more about us and the way we live and the people you meet. So those would be some recommendations I have.
Thank you, Rafaela. And Bazal, quickly as well, as volunteers come into the community, or what are some of the places that you recommend them to go, or people they should meet as they start to get more and more comfortable with assimilation and the reciprocation of their culture?
Yeah, I'd repeat a lot of things Rafael said about bringing pictures from home, bringing pictures of your family and of your friends, and of things you enjoy doing. That is oftentimes a really good way to break the ice and to talk about how sort of you lived before you got here, and does help move the conversation along. Besides that, the homestay families that will be hosting the volunteers will have already had some experience with hosting before, and will themselves break the ice with conversations, with questions, with getting you involved in some of their own daily activities at home, in the farm, and chipping in those same activities is always a really good way to also quickly become useful in the house, but to also gain people's trust and get more accepted much faster into a really small, tight-knit community. Oftentimes neighbors will come over, they will also ask you questions and want you to share about, why you're there, what you're doing, why you decided to come to a place which is so far away and so different from where you're from in the US. And so sharing these little stories, and I think building this human bond is what is oftentimes the most important, and something that really allows you to get deeper faster. Besides that, just learning little phrases in Ladakhi, which we'll also teach during orientation, makes it much more fun. And I think Ladakhis really love hearing foreigners speak their language, because most Indians can't speak it either. And so it's always just a fun exercise to show that you're involved and invested in both learning their language as well as spending your time there with their children, teaching them English, computer science, and things like that. So I think overall, to show that you're invested in the time that you're there and not aware, aloof, or disinterested, will just get you immersed really quickly and make things very, very easy.
Thank you, Behzad. And that idea of not taking yourself so seriously and realizing if you're trying to speak another language or learn that you're, even if you're sounding like a child and you're young, that's what children do. They play, they experiment. And in that part, I remember my first couple months in Brazil, I had a friend of mine who had spent a year in Beirut and learned Arabic. And as I was leaving to go, he had just prepared me saying, listen to me, no matter what, when you speak, people are going to smile often, and just take solace in the fact that you're making people smile versus making people frown. So it's a good mentality to have, and thank you for both for kind of sharing that, and for them assimilation skills for the volunteers as they immerse themselves in the community. So thank you. Moving quickly to this next part of once you're in community and have immersed yourself a bit, is thinking about projects, different project resources, and maybe development inside of the community. Rafaela, are there some potential options for volunteers in local project development or programs in either Curitiba or the Caiçaras?
Yes, for sure. All of those communities where the volunteers are placed here in Curitiba or in the coast face a lot of issues and challenges. So the volunteers are really welcome to suggest and implement improvements on, like, even in administrative tasks or project development. Some of those NGOs here in Curitiba already have their own projects running to educate the students, for example, in terms of respecting the environment, collecting trash, and other sustainability issues. So the volunteers, according to their background, can also bring new ideas, and they are encouraged to get involved. Also, some of those projects, for example, support the children's family by visiting them, donating food baskets, and the volunteers will have the chance to learn all the different activities that are developed to support those communities, not only related to English teaching. In the Caiçara communities, for example, they have received training to welcome tourists, and they really are eager to learn English for that, to welcome international tourists. And they, for example, they need to learn communication skills. So, for example, to develop a business plan and a marketing strategy to reach tourists. So if the volunteer could help them, for example, write a blog in English, or create a Facebook page, publish pictures, teach the teenagers how to create nice posts using an app or a website, or even a web design program or something. This would be something they could go further besides teaching English and leaving more impact in the community they are. So there are several possibilities, and we will be also providing you counseling and helping you think on how you can contribute further, what you do great, what you would like to get involved, and how this can benefit the projects where you are based.
Thank you, Rafaela. A lot of practical options for volunteers. And quickly to Behzad, maybe just to possibly share some best practices of where you point volunteers to begin as they're contemplating doing something in their community alongside other members. Just if you want to share some of those best practice ideas.
Sure. For some of the bigger villages in Nubra, there are already really strong village committees. And I think as a volunteer gets integrated into a homestay and a host family, they'll have opportunities to sort of understand what the community is up to, what sort of issues are coming up in the forefront. You know, the Dalai Lama will be visiting in early July, just as our volunteers get there, and so there'll be a lot of hustle and bustle in these ordinarily hustle and bustle free villages. And since almost all, you know, about 90% of the valley is Tibetan Buddhist, it's a really big deal for the Dalai Lama to come. And it'll also attract people from nearby places. And so this will give an opportunity for the volunteers to see the village sort of transform into this regional hub where a lot of people are coming in. They'll see a lot of foreign tourists, a lot of domestic tourists, and just a lot of locals gather in these points. And that'll give them ideas for helping their homestay develop various aspects of their homestay business and of their tourism businesses. A lot of the young men work as guides in Leh and across Ladakh during the tourist season, or as drivers, or as guest house owners, or, you know, B&B managers, whatever it might be. Tourism is a really big source of income for these families for the few months of summer when tourists do come. And so they'll get some ideas on where to be useful, on skills they have, whether it is in fact in maybe helping design a website, or just helping put in place an email response system for when they get reservations or bookings, or even just helping people brush up on their English skills so that they're better equipped to handle foreign Western tourists. So there will be lots of potential for getting involved. And as a foreigner, as a Westerner, as an American, people will often ask them their opinion on certain things, or will straight out ask for their help when they know they have a certain skill, such as with maybe helping them with their emails, or with just upgrading their life skills.
Thanks, Bazad, and also that parallel to the volunteer that's there and making sure that it has a consciousness of how they're viewed, and that awareness too, and finding that balance again of the conversations and interactions they'd have with community members. That's the valuable part too, as they will be in a place where they'll be asked all that information. That's that's really, there's just so many options for people that go there that really utilize their tangible hard skills. That's just a wonderful thing of empowerment for their side. So thank you both of you for sharing that information. Moving on to kind of thinking about all the things we've just heard from Bazad and Hafiela about, and these communities that you would go to, both in your orientation and the assimilation and your day-to-day work. Thinking about the culmination of this type of experience, and just looking here, as volunteers, and this goes to Bazad quickly, as volunteers end their time in Ladakh, what are some of their reflection activities? What are some things that you try to do with them?
So towards the end of it, what we're going to do is retreat again to our little farmyard stay in Nubra, talk about what the experience was like, what they learned, what sort of difficulties they faced, and how they solved those challenges. And of course, we'll be there alongside their voluntary term to help them with those difficulties. But I think it's oftentimes in these challenges abroad, you discover new ways of doing something, or you learn about your own values, and how oftentimes these challenges help you become a stronger, more informed person. So we'll talk about those in our debriefings, and then we'll also talk a little bit about what lies ahead for the volunteers, for the younger volunteers who are still in college, and how this experience can perhaps help them figure out where they can be most useful, or maybe help guide them towards a new career path that was perhaps as yet unexplored. especially if it overlaps with public service, with education, with climate change. And we'd like to push as many people as we can towards those fields. And then there will be excursions. We'll take the volunteers out to some really beautiful lakes and up on a little hike in National Park, Camas National Park, which is famous for its snow leopards, which are incredibly rare to see and are quite the hit item on many people's bucket lists. But we'll do some camping. We'll explore a different side of Ladakh to what they will have experienced during their voluntary sessions, and it'll also give them a chance to unwind together as a group of Americans and to make the most out of their collective shared experiences.
Thank you, Bazad. Wow, that's impressive to hear. And so Rafaela, as well, during those final days in Brazil, where will the cohort go to around the region or in the country during their final days there?
Okay, so we've planned an excursion to the coast of Paraná State, visiting different communities. It's out of the beaten track destination, so it's a place regular, like tourists coming to Brazil wouldn't have the chance to visit. And the goal is to really have an immersion in a community that live in a different way, to reflect about what we have in common, what are our daily challenges, what the volunteers can do to contribute even after they return back home, what's their purpose in terms of career, and how they can create a bigger impact even through their profession, not only by going abroad on a volunteer exchange or doing some volunteer work back home, but a reflection for ourselves as human beings, and what is the what's the path we want to create in our lives, and how does it impact in the world in general, in our families. So it's a week to really develop our consciousness of who we are and who we want to be, and how this experience has had an impact in our lives and what they have learned. So each one of the volunteers with their different experiences will be able to share on daily circles of conversation, and we will organize a lot of group dynamics also to connect our thoughts with our heart and with our will, what we want to create in this world. So that's it.
No, that's not it. That's very important. Thank you, Rafaela. It's that part I just love hearing the two of you say this about your programs, and that quick progression of a volunteer being there in a local capacity, and all the different tactics and skills they have to use for immersion, and to have this part of being in a brand new place, but at the same time seeing it from more of a macro perspective and understanding their place in it, and also the place that they go. And there's an immense amount of feelings and again, perspectives that'll come out that I think both of you really framed really well. So thank you for elaborating on those. What I want to go to right now is just to talk quickly about some of the application process and requirements. Just kind of going through this is participants in either of these awesome programs must be a native level English speaker, so not necessarily a native English speaker, but native level. Be between the ages of 18 and 74, so a broad array of people do our summer programs with WorldTeach. The general age is someone who is in school, but we do have plenty of different and standard deviations of volunteers that are of different ages, and you're definitely encouraged to go along, and make sure that we look for traits, especially in your personal statement, of being a highly flexible, mature, and having demonstrated interest in global engagement, education, or intercultural learning. Alongside our our WorldTeach Summer Programs, we offer a participation by April 30th, if you have applied, the option of enrolling in our accredited TEFL certification program for free. And that's something as an accreditation that volunteers can use for teaching in other parts of the world, and is an additional kind of certification that they can acquire. Application materials, a resume, a personal statement, one letter of recommendation, not too rigorous an application process relative to our year-long programs and fellowships, which do have a bit more information and interview included. You can begin your application on our website. And as you're looking here, applications will be accepted on a rolling basis until April 15th, so another 2.5 weeks or so. And the decision is usually made 2 to 3 weeks after your completed application. And just finally on the bottom, just to kind of see the program dates for both our Brazil and India programs with Bezad and Rafaela. In Brazil, it will run from June 11th till August 5th. And then with Bezad in India will be July 1st through August 7th. So just taking those in consideration as you contemplate the timing of these programs for you and your schedule as you consider doing something like this. So logistics and fees. The program fee of $49.90 covers the following, which is your visa to the country, your housing and meals, and that's housing and meals both during your time as a volunteer as well as during orientation, health and emergency evacuation insurance, your training and orientation and the implementation of those, meals and housing during orientation and these meetings, as just mentioned earlier, both a mid-service and end-of-service meeting. And at the end, as we had just spoken about, this kind of reflective, culminating group debriefing, excursion, and reflection that you'll do as a cohort. There are full-time in-country summer program coordinators like Bezad and Rafaela here, and then included as well as in-country transportation. The only thing that is not included is your flight directly to either Brazil or India. So as we've gone through and during our time of both having the webinar on and having a couple of attendees, if there are any questions that you'd like to put through on the chat function or questions, please send them through right now, and we'd be happy to answer them. Okay, it doesn't look like any questions have come through at this time. I'm going to move through to the final part of the webinar. So if you do have any additional questions or contemplations, you can always email us at either publicity@worldteach.org or info@worldteach.org, and we'd be happy to give a further explanation of your question. You can look for more information about these programs at this website at worldteach.org /compare programs, and you can compare all the different programs that are there. And again, as mentioned, you can apply for the India program or the Brazil program by April 15th, and you can apply directly on our website. We hope to see you in India or Brazil as one of our WorldTeach Summer Professional Development volunteers. Thank you again to Bezad and Rafaela for calling in from different times. I know at Bezad it's almost pushing more towards 11 o'clock in the evening local for you, and Rafaela around 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon. Again, please visit our website to learn more about the WorldTeach India and Brazil programs, and follow us on social media for the latest program information, alumni photos, blog posts, business-related news, and more. Thank you so much for everybody who attended, and we hope to see you in Brazil or India. Thank you, Rafaela and Bezad.
Thank you, Nolan.